Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mike McMahon. I'm Executive Director of the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada. And today I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Ben Brody to have a conversation about his experiences as a scholar and a musician. Ben currently serves as Director of Church Music Studies at Whitworth University in Spokane, Washington, where he teaches courses in church music and music appreciation and serves as Director of Campus Worship. He's a life member of the Hymn Society and has served in a number of capacities, one of which was as president from 2020 to 2022. And also, he was the convener of the group that produced the collection Singing Welcome, Songs and Hymns for Refugees and Immigrants, which was posted in 2017. He's a prolific hymn tune composer and has authored two collections of tunes published by GIA Publications. So, Ben, it's great to be with you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, friends. It's good to be with you today.
Yeah. I see we have a nice group of people with us today, and I would like to encourage anybody that would like to send a message through the chat or ask a question through their chat or through the Q&A. Please feel free to do so. And it looks like we have a pretty wide spread of people from all over North America. So, including now, Ben, today you are in Michigan, right?
Yes, that's right. I'm this week I'm at a seminar at Calvin University on worship and grief. So we just had our lunch break, and I'm up in my room now for this.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad you took the time out to talk to me today. Um, I'd love to start, early on and ask you about your growing up experiences and how it is that you came to be interested, in music and church and ministry, and because obviously all three of those have been really strong in your own career.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Well, I my father was an elementary music teacher, and so some of my earliest memories are of him sitting at the piano, and going to sleep hearing him singing and playing the piano. And he actually uh, wrote some of his own musicals that his elementary students would perform. And so I just have these memories of just music as I was falling asleep, often happening. Um, in the first 5 years of my life, we attended the church that my grandfather pastored, and my dad helped to lead worship for that. So I had some early experience there, just getting to hear and participate in congregational song with him leading.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And did you then grow into some church leadership roles or church participating in church music stuff?
Well, no, actually, and I'll tell you
Oh,
why. When I was 5, my grandfather retired, and my family started attending a large charismatic church in Portland. And this had about 2,000, 3,000 members. It's actually the church where CCLI got its start. The music director at this church was the person who founded CCLI as a way to help churches be able to sing worship choruses from a variety of sources. And so this was a huge church. And also, it was so I didn't really see that there were any opportunities there for me to really participate in music. But also, I loved worshiping. I loved participating in music and worship as a member of the congregation. But the idea of being a leader in worship sort of freaked me out. I just thought that person, in the view of worship that I understood at that age in that congregation, my view of the worship director was somebody whose job it is to generate enough emotional engagement in the congregation that people feel like they've met God in worship. And I just felt like I don't want to have that responsibility. I thought, if I wake up in the morning and I'm just not don't have my A game, and I don't modulate one last time on that chorus so that everyone really feels like they met God, I'm gonna just disappoint all these people. And so it really took kind of a shift in my understanding of what worship is to realize later, while I was in college, I think I might have a role to play in this.
wow. I'd love to come back to that and talk about that a little bit. I think that'd be interesting to hear more about. But did you study music then in school or on the
Yeah,
side?
yeah, great question. So yeah, I my freshman year in high school, I was a band kid. I enjoyed band, and I there was a required class that I was trying to get out of having to take when I came in as a freshman in high school. And I went to meet with the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor said, "Well, everyone has to take this class. The only people we make exceptions for are people that are in both band and choir. They get excused from it." And I said, "Well, I've never sung in a choir, but whatever that is, it sounds better than taking this class. So sign me up." So so I went and met with the choir director. He had me sing. I made it into the top a cappella choir, which I thought, wow, I must be really good. I later realized it was the only choir that had male voices in it. But that first semester, the music that we sang, if you can believe this, this was a high school choir. We sang four pieces. Uh, Two were in Latin, one was in German, one was in English. They were all from the Renaissance or Baroque.
Huh.
Now you think about, if you're planning a choral program to try to attract people to join the choir, you might choose one of those pieces. You probably wouldn't choose all four of them to be that. But
Yeah.
for me, this experience of just hearing this Renaissance polyphony and these voices overlapping and getting to join and participate in that was an experience I just never had before. And within a couple weeks, I just thought, I don't know exactly what this is, but I want to be a part of this for the rest of my life. This seems really important. So my career goal from my freshman year of high school had been to be a college choir director. I just thought, I want to do this. I want to do this thing as well as I possibly can and with the best voices that I can. So that must mean I want to be a college choir director. So I joined the American Choral Directors Association when I was like 14. As you might suspect, I was a pretty nerdy kid. Um, but it was when I got to college, I attended Whitworth University, Whitworth College then, where I now teach. And my second year at Whitworth, I had gotten a student leadership position as a campus ministry coordinator. So I lived in the dorm and helped lead a Bible study. And the dean of the chapel that fall said, we need somebody to kind of help coordinate this evening student-led contemporary service, and asked me and another student to do that. And so I had never played from a lead sheet, never played I loved participating in contemporary worship music, but I had not played it at all. I was a classical pianist. And so I said, well, okay, we'll give this a shot. And so I and this friend kind of co-led worship teams for this service, and I learned how to play from a lead sheet and how to follow a chord chart, and kind of slowly kind of self-taught myself to play in that style of piano. So that was kind of my first experience in worship. My and then a year or two later, there was an opening position of director of music at a small Presbyterian church. And I saw that the person they wanted was going to lead the worship team and play the piano and then direct a choir. And I thought, oh, here's my chance to get some experience directing a choir. And so that was really my first kind of um, experience in a church worship setting. Part of what I loved about it was just I'm kind of a generalist, and I like to dabble in lots of different things. And so I loved getting to think about kind of on a big structural level how the liturgy all fits together and how music finds its way into that. I loved getting to play the piano. I loved getting to direct a choir, getting to kind of manage and lead teams of people doing things. So it kind of let me do a bunch of things that I was interested in doing.
Wow, that's so interesting. Now, I would like to go back to that previous topic because it seems like you had separate paths toward involvement in music and church, and all of a sudden it came together there. Can you say a little bit about how the kind of transition you had to make yourself to kind of get there?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think this is a good I think this is what often happens. I'll bet many of us in the church have had situations where we never thought of ourselves in a particular role until somebody said, "We need you to do that thing." And so that was kind of what that was for me in leading music in this contemporary worship vein. I really thought this is never something I'm going to do myself. But it was something that I was asked to do, and where there was a need that I had some ability to be able to meet, and I kind of um, just did what I was asked, and then that led to other things. But I will say a word about, and I tell this story often to students about my kind of vocational journey because even when I came to teach at Whitworth, so after graduation, I taught elementary music in Spokane for a year and a half, moved to Seattle, took a full-time church job. But the intent there was to really go to grad school, get my master's and doctorate in choral conducting, and then get a college teaching job doing choir. And I took a job at my university then in 2003, where I still am, mainly teaching campus worship, teaching worship, and then overseeing our campus worship program. And I really thought that would be a temporary thing. I thought this is something I'll do for, maybe 3 or 5 years, but I still want to be a college choral director. And it was over time, though, that I really came to see my vocation shift to being really about congregational music. I still love choral music. I don't direct a choir right now. And maybe someday I will. I would enjoy that if that occasion arose, I'm sure. But I really came to see the primary musical activity of the church is congregational singing. And I found that that's where I really wanted to commit my energy, is to helping to strengthen that, to nurture that. And again, not to downplay the important role that choirs can play and other types of music in worship, but congregational singing is the one thing that everyone participates in. And so it's a sort of a equalizing, everyone's on a level playing field when we sing together and all of our voices are joining together. And so it was over time that I came to that understanding of my vocation. But what I tell students is I would never have gotten to that understanding if I hadn't been following this direction of this career goal of being a college choir director. It was heading in that direction that caused me at one point to realize, oh, there's this other vocation that's similar, has some similarities, but is different. I would never have seen that path had I not gone
Mhm.
further along this other path. And it's a good reminder, I think, that sort of that nothing is wasted. That even if something changes, something shifts for us, that there are ways that that can be helpful. Actually, that we wouldn't have gotten where we are without heading in that other direction first.
That's really interesting. And it's sort of, I think about all the members of the Hymn Society that I know, and it seems to me that I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody that said, yeah, ever since I was a kid, I really wanted to lead congregational song. I mean, normally, you come into it from some other aspect that's related to congregational song, but it's sort of directed towards. It's just fascinating to me. I hadn't really thought about that before you
And
said.
I think I think often for many of us who love music, we were attracted because of something that we either singing in a choir, playing in a band, taking piano, organ lessons, whatever it is, of doing music at a really high level. And
Yeah.
I think in some ways maybe there's a level of maturing that needs to happen for all of us till we can get to the point where we can realize actually the more important thing is this musical activity that happens with everyone, even though sort of my artistic itch may not be getting scratched in the same way as it is when I'm doing this really high level of music making. This is
Right.
really formative and really important.
Right. So in your, I know you've also been a church music director for a long time, and I assume you've had choirs in your church, right? And I'm
Well,
wondering, or oh, let me finish the question first, and
yeah,
then
yeah, go ahead.
so I'm just wondering about the relationship between any kind of singing groups that you might have had there and the singing of the congregation.
Yeah, yeah. So it is interesting. I have not regularly directed a choir since getting my doctorate in choral conducting. In my church that I was where I was music director for 20 years, we would do an occasional choir, maybe for Advent or Lent. Um, and really, when I started that job, I thought my primary role was to start a choral program at that church. I thought, hey, I've got this doctorate. This church hasn't had a choir. That's what I'm going to do. And I worked hard to kind of get that going, and it just never quite took. And it was actually through kind of discerning what does this congregation need that I realized this really isn't a primary activity that seems to be the right thing for this congregation. And so we focused very heavily on congregational singing. We typically sang 7 or 8 songs every Sunday at that church. So there was a lot of congregational participation, a lot of singing, but the choir had a sort of incidental, occasional role.
That's really interesting too, because I hear so many people talk about, developing a choir and the congregation singing along with the choir. But what you're talking about is really a radically different approach, right?
And really, it was, I mean, in many ways, it was treating the congregation as a choir. One of the things that I did slowly over time was taught that congregation to sing at least some things in parts. One of the pieces that I have strong memories of is teaching John Bell's Don't Be Afraid. And it's in three parts. And so over about 4 or 5 weeks, we sang that every week. I kind of lined out the parts. But that congregation learned those parts. And by the end of that 5 or 6 weeks, we could sing that. And by the last stanza, we would cut out the instruments. Everyone was singing a cappella.
Um,
And what's been fascinating, I mean, that was probably about 15 years ago that I introduced that. Um, Even though I have now left my role as music director of that church, the the I still go back probably about every month or two. I'm asked to come play for a memorial service, and that is "Don't Be Afraid" is one of the most frequently requested songs
hmm.
for memorial services. That was has been a formative song that's really lived. I think because it's simple and because people have this sense singing in parts together, this sense of, oh, this is my community surrounding me in song. And I think
Yeah.
that has been particularly meaningful to people.
So, I mean, that suggests to me that you viewed your role there in a pastoral kind of way, that in fact, music was your way of pastoring that congregation. Would
Oh,
you say?
absolutely. Yeah. And I worked for those 20 years with a wonderful pastor where we really viewed what we did as this kind of integrated work together in worship. And it was really a shift that it was a shift from a sense that my job as the church musician is to bring my bring what I know about church music and put it onto this congregation. Shifting from that to my job is to know this congregation and then discern how best to allow music to help form their faith.
Oh, that's a really powerful way of approaching, I think, church music ministry. So I appreciate you sharing that viewpoint. Um, I'd like to go back a little bit to your education because you went to Seattle. I assume that is that where you got both your master's and doctoral degrees?
That's right. Yeah, at the University of Washington.
So, what did you bring from that whole educational experience that has really helped shape your work subsequently?
That's a great question. I had a great experience in grad school, but by the time I was really working on my doctorate, it was clear to me that my vocation was heading somewhere other than primarily as a choral director.
Uh,
So it was, and because it was going to be in higher education, it was still important for me to get a doctorate. And so I was grateful that Dr. Jeffrey Bors, who's the director of choral activities there, was my primary mentor. That he recognized that as well, and he enabled me to sort of adapt the curriculum in certain ways to be able to help it prepare me for what I, at that point, was anticipating doing. One of the ways he did that was he decided to offer an elective course in church music, and then invited me to sort of co-teach that with him. And so I'm just so grateful, and that's really shaped my mentoring of students. I'm grateful for a mentor who recognized not every student's the same. This student has particular particular ideas of, or there seems to be going a particular direction. How can I support that and encourage that? And so, yeah, so I'm grateful for that.
and now you've been mentoring students for quite a long time there at Whitworth, right? You've been there since, you say 2003?
That's right. Just finished my 22nd year.
Wow. And you have a program in church music ministry there. Is that?
We do. We just offer a Bachelor of Arts in Music degree. We've had a track within that Bachelor of Arts in Music Ministry, and I've directed that for many years. We've actually just eliminated that track, and instead we now have a worship leadership minor. And the benefits of this are that students who want to do full-time music ministry can pursue a BA in music, kind of a plain Bachelor of Arts in Music degree, but they can add this worship leadership track, which gives them courses like history and theology of worship and church music techniques and an internship. And that does essentially the same thing as that track did, but also students who are going to add this minor, but they might be majoring in other things. There are so many students who go out and lead worship in a part-time or even volunteer capacity as they have careers in other fields. And so this minor allows those students to be able to benefit from this as well. And so it's and often it's, as is often the case, sometimes the best song leaders are not music majors or not necessarily even the best musicians. And so it's a great way it gives opportunity for a wider variety of students to participate in these roles.
I see. So you have students in the church music ministry program who are not music majors.
Yes, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. And do you have an ecumenical breadth within your students?
We do. The vast majority of our of our Christian students, come from non-denominational churches. So most of them have a background of extensive familiarity with worship choruses, but often less familiarity with hymns or other types of church music. And so I taught a class this last spring, History and Theology of Worship. I had 32 students in that class. I think I had a couple that had Roman Catholic backgrounds. I had one Muslim student. I had three or four that had some kind of Presbyterian-ish background, and I think the rest were from non-denominational churches.
Oh,
So it's the vast majority of students. I actually really love that because I'll introduce what I think is a kind of an old familiar hymn, and it's brand new to almost all of them. And so it's really fun to be in that role of getting to spark those imaginations and introduce them to a wider variety of music than they've been exposed to before.
that's interesting. You talked earlier about the formative aspect of music ministry, and I guess I'm wondering now, as you see students coming out of these various backgrounds, how do you, what's your thought about the formation that's going on in churches today in terms of music and faith?
Yeah, yeah. I think that um, I think probably all churches and all traditions uh, have formative practices that are helpful and formative practices that are malformative, maybe we would say. And so I think that one of the things I appreciate about my worship chorus singing students when they come in is there's a passion and an excitement and a sort of expectation that they're going to meet God in worship through congregational song. And
Uh,
so what I like to do is sort of build on that, and I think it's much easier to to introduce them to new things when it's kind of a yes and yes, that's so great. I love this and I want to affirm this. And let's think about what types of themes are we not singing in worship and why are we not singing those? And well, here's a song. Let's sing this. And how does that help us think differently about what we do in worship? And so I feel like a lot of my focus these days is on yes to that passion and energy and love for Jesus that's coming through in what they do, and how does that what role does that play in a worship service where we're also trying to form disciples and shape people for faithful lives of following Jesus? And so that kind of broadening of the conversation is really rich and rewarding, and getting to see students slowly sort of make those changes over time and kind of expand their understanding of what it is that we're doing in worship, that it's beyond just identifying what songs we really like to sing and singing those. Um, yeah, yeah.
Well, it sounds like your background, you're uniquely positioned to address a pretty wide variety of students, for classically trained to only play from lead sheets, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you've done a lot of all those. You've done all those things already yourself.
Well, and I'm grateful. I mean, I came, as you've heard, I came from a worship chorus only singing church tradition, and have been grateful for the ways that others have helped me to see the wider variety of things that we can sing. And so I really feel fortunate to get to help introduce more people to that breadth.
Cool. Well, I wonder if we could talk about your writing for a minute. you've published a lot of tunes and arrangements, and I'm wondering if you could say a word about your process. I mean, how do you go about writing tunes?
That's a great question. I Actually, could we first, I think this might lead to the answer to this question, but maybe I'll first talk about how I started writing tunes, if that's okay.
Sure,
Because
please.
because the hymn society is very central to this. I wouldn't be writing hymn tunes were it not for the hymn society. I attended my first hymn society conference in 2007, and that was in Ottawa. I flew from Spokane. I got the cheapest flight I could. It took 26 hours to get there. And I think it was like five different flights. Somehow I went to Seattle, then to San Francisco, I think to Houston, and then Chicago. Anyway, it was this convoluted thing, but it was the cheapest ticket, and I thought, well, that's I need to go the cheapest route. So I got there late, and the first night of the conference was John Bell leading a hymn festival that was all, I think, Scottish Reformation psalms. I think it was something, I think the theme was something to do with Reformation, some kind of a Reformation theme.
Mm.
And I stood in the back of the church. I was there with my suitcase. I got dropped off right at the church as it started. And I just heard this singing, and I thought, oh, these are my people. I mean, it was one of the, I've heard many people in our organization say that that was their experience, was they found their people, but I sort of felt that immediately, even on, a couple of days without any sleep. And so I had in the lead up to that conference, I had seen a note that there was a tune writing fest or a tune writing contest. And one of the texts, there were a couple of texts given that you could write a tune for. One of them was Georgia Harkness's Hope of the World.
Mm.
And I'd never written a hymn tune before. I was not a composer. I did not think of myself in any way as a composer. But I thought, well, that may be kind of fun. I'm going to just try my hand at this. So I wrote a little tune out and submitted it. It didn't win the contest. But then I thought, that was kind of fun. I think I'm going to sign up for this tune writing session at the conference. And I did that. And we got sent a text in advance to write a tune for, and I did that. And at the conference, a couple people when they heard my tune said, "Oh, that was pretty good. You should keep working at that." And so I thought, "Oh, this is kind of fun. I'm going to keep playing around with this." The other piece of that was about the same time or a little bit after. In my congregation, in planning for worship, I discovered the hymns of Sylvia Dunstan, and I just fell in love with these texts. And I tracked down at a library her collections of her couple published collections at that point of hymn texts. But some of them were to unfamiliar tunes, and some of them I just were to tunes I didn't think were a real great fit. And so that was what really kind of started me writing. Was I thought, I want my congregation to sing this text. It's really important, but I don't think this tune really works. And I don't think of myself really as a composer, but I think I can write something that can at least help us to be able to sing this decently. And so that's what kind of got me started, was writing to texts of Sylvia. I submitted a few of those a few years later to GIA, and one of them got selected by Randy Sensmeyer for to be included in this collection. What was it called? Assembled for Song. And it was presented for the first time at the Richmond conference. And I was attending the Richmond conference, and I met Randy for the first time early on. And he said, "Oh, why don't you come up and play that tune at the session?" And I said, "Oh, that'd be great." So I did. The next year was, I think, the Winnipeg conference, if I'm remembering right. I'm sitting at a lunch table and happened to meet a guy named Adam Tice, who sat down, and he said, "Hey, I heard your tune last year. Would you ever want to write something for me?" And I said, "Wow." I mean, the thought never occurred to me that somebody might send a text. I said, "Yeah, sure." So Adam sent me a text and wrote a tune, and a couple weeks later sent me another text, and that started a very fruitful relationship. And so much of that writing background, I mean, really all of that is because of the Hymn Society and the network and the connections that developed through this organization.
It is pretty amazing the level of connection that the society has promoted among different denominations, among people of different cultures. I mean, it's really quite impressive, I think.
Mhm.
So I noticed that so far you've talked about writing tunes from texts. Do you ever do it the other way around?
Very rarely. I actually just last week I've been working on a tune that sort of came to mind without any text. So when I get it in a little better shape, I'll send it to one of my collaborators and see if one of them wants to. It feels like writing something for it, but I almost always start with a text. I think there are maybe three times now that I've not started with it from a text, and I really like that because I think I like that what I will do first is just sometimes even for, a week or two, but just sort of daily read through the text, try to get a sense of the rhythm of the text, kind of the tempo that the text wants to go, what's going to kind of feel like the right fit for it. And almost always the rhythm is the first element that comes, is that there's a certain rhythm and meter that feels like it's going to be the best fit for this. So that's usually what comes first, then a melody, and then and then harmony and whatever else after that. But it's almost always paying attention to what's the right rhythm for these particular words.
I think it's an interesting point because it suggests a relationship between word and music where word has precedence.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if is that something that you subscribe to?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, uh, which feels, I guess, kind of strange as a composer to to say that, but I have so much admiration for my friends who write words, these thoughtful words, and what a privilege it is to get to set those to music. The hymn, a hymn tune without words. Um, Maybe it's not that it's not meaningful, but it doesn't have the same kind of, it has it's a different kind of meaning. A hymn text without music still has an important um, message to give, I guess I would say. But I also think that there's just a joy in this kind of collaboration between the text writer and the tune writer of getting to kind of work back and forth and hone something till it really matches. It feels like they're well matched with each other.
We were in good company. I mean, I had an interview with Alice Parker a couple of years ago, and she famously, was an advocate for text, 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 always beginning with the text. And she was no slouch as a musician either.
Well, and I really think that, my purpose as a composer isn't to give people a really cool tune to sing. My purpose as a composer is to help these words to dwell deeply in people, these particular words. And so, not that you can't then swap a tune out with a different text, those kinds of things can still work too. But when I'm writing music, it's to help these words enable them to be put on the lips of a congregation.
Sometimes what I hear under that is also there's a pastoral purpose. It's to help this community to engage with this text through this tune.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I think it's so also really formative for my development as a composer has been having a specific congregation to be able to write music for and to get feedback from and to discover what works or what doesn't.
Right, right. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about meeting God in worship. That you what you said it turned you off was, or it sort of made you hesitate was the responsibility for people's emotional response. And
Yes. Yep.
this is a broader view that it's not just about emotion, it's also about engaging a text.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I wonder if we could switch over to the Hymn Society a little bit because
Yeah.
you've been very active and really done a lot to promote the Hymn Society over the years. I wonder if you could say, you said you went for the first time in 2007. So, how did you get more deeply involved?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'll tell you, here's another great story. The year before, let's see, I'm getting my conference years mixed up, but I think it was the Richmond conference. Was that maybe that was the year before Columbus? Whatever the year was before Columbus. Uh,
13.
that was John Thornburg. I met him, I think, somewhere at that conference, and out of the blue, he said, "Hey, would you be on this? Would you be on a conference planning committee?" And I had nobody knew me from anyone else. I hadn't had any involvement. But he just extended this invitation, and I said, I'd be happy to do that. And we had a really wonderful conference planning committee that over time shaped that. I think that conference, but that was really what kind of got me started in deeper involvement with the organization. And I look back on that so often, and I think about the power of just that invitation to do something. I think so often we think about we don't want to ask somebody to do something because we know they're busy, and but how meaningful that was, and so I've always been grateful to John for that invitation to somebody who had no background with the Hymn Society, was not any sort of established figure in any way. But what a blessing that was to have that invitation and be able to serve in that way.
That's pretty cool. And it wasn't long after that that you were invited onto the executive committee, right?
Yeah, I think that would have been around 2015 maybe or so. Yeah, and so I started as a member at large, served in that role for 3 years, and then as president-elect and president, and then past president. So I have really loved getting to be a part of our organization in that leadership capacity. One of the particular challenges was, the 2 years of my presidency were 2020 to 2022. So the first time I actually saw anybody in person during my presidency was on the last few days at our Washington, D.C. conference. Everything else had been on Zoom. And so I was really grateful to get to be a part of helping us kind of weather that period of time. And in many ways, I look back on those couple of years and think about how I think that made us a much stronger organization. The ways that all of these online programs now that we do that we didn't do prior to that. And I think that has helped us to become a much more connected. The ways that we've been able to invite international friends to come in and join us for those, and to offer to learn from them. I think that's been a really wonderful way that our organization has expanded to activity beyond the summer conference and a few other things.
Yeah, that is interesting. They call you the pandemic era president, right? That really did characterize it. But I agree with you that it really changed us. It forced us to do things differently, and thankfully we were pretty well prepared and equipped to do that. And in large part, the vision of yourself and others leaders in the executive committee. So it's been a great thing.
I
Um,
think that one of the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please.
I was just going to say, I think that one of the real strengths of our organization is I don't know, I don't really know of any other organization that brings together at least three really different types of people with different goals. And so I think of these three types as sort of creators. So we've got composers and hymn writers and people who are creating new things. And so our organization wants to support that and help nurture and encourage those gifts. We bring together scholars. So we have lots of people who are in maybe in graduate programs or are teaching and are creating new scholarship that helps us to understand aspects of congregational singing better. And then we have the practitioners, the church musicians and pastors and other leaders who are using congregational song and wanting to discover new things to sing and new ways to lead them. It would be easy for us to say, we're going to pick one of those, and that's going to be what our organization is about. And I think in many ways, some of the challenges for our organization is that we're serving these three, and probably even more than just those three groups, but those seem to me three primary groups. But I think one of the great strengths is these three groups that we have together. And so when the scholars are doing their work, they are thinking about what is it that how can our scholarship benefit our friends here who are leading worship in their churches? When composers and people crafting hymn texts are writing those things. They're thinking about, they're thinking about the pastors and the church musicians who are going to be leading these and how will they work in different settings. And so I think there's a real important aspect to our work, which is that we bring these different groups together, as well as people who just come to love singing and want to be a part of the great singing that happens when we gather.
Oh, there you are. We lost you there for a moment.
Oh, sorry.
So could you repeat the last, maybe the last 20 or 30 seconds?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Mike. Yeah, the I just think that there's such a strength that that came to get that comes when we bring those three groups together, and there's a symbiotic relationship among those groups.
Well, I just learned from Milner that it was I who was lost, not you. So,
We're all lost to some degree,
sorry
so
about that, folks. A couple of comments I think that are interesting. David Eicher and Joe Smith were saying that there's fourth group of folks who just love to sing congregational song, and
yes,
you have that too. Right?
that's wonderful.
And Peter Raywald's putting those three groups together strengthens each one. For composers to write while in conversation with those who lead worship improves both the new compositions as well as introducing new compositions.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
And it feels to me like most of the people who are part of the Hymn Society identify with more than one of the three or four groups. That there's an intersectionality even in the individuals who come. That their the interests are broader than just practice or just scholarship or just creation.
Yes,
They
absolutely. I think that's another key piece is that I think most of us might have a primary area of interest, but we do have some interest in the others. And so yes, that absolutely is true.
Well, in some ways, you're like the perfect example of this because you're a scholar who has also been a church music director for many years and who also creates tunes for congregational singing. I mean, I think it's an interesting.
And every time I come back from a conference or other activity, each one of those aspects of my vocation are strengthened because of things that I've learned and conversations I've had.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, and it's been really fast. I just wondered if there's anything else that we didn't talk about that you were kind of hoping we'd touch on today.
I think we've covered some good ground. Uh, I just thought I'd just add just that I'm just so excited for our organization and the future of the Hymn Society. I think this work that we do and the way that our organization functions is so important. And so I just, uh, in all that is going on in our world, in our country, in our communities, this is important work. And I think it's just good to remind each other of that, to encourage each other in this work, because it makes a difference.
Indeed, it does. So, one final question, and that is, what would be your fondest hope for the Hymn Society as we look forward?
I would just hope that we keep reaching out to new groups of people that that can be served by our organization. I think our organization has a history of regularly asking who's not at the table, who do we want to invite to be here, who would benefit from the kinds of rich conversations and experiences that we have. And so I anticipate, I expect, and I hope that we will continue to do that. And it's so wonderful to get to see the ways that our organization changes over time as a result of the gifts that each new person brings.
Well, and you certainly have fostered that through your own leadership in this organization. So, I'm grateful for you and for this conversation we've had today.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a joy to be with
So.
you and with so many friends here online. It's good to be with you all.
Thanks everybody for being with us. This is the last interview for this season. We have another series of 9 interviews set up for next year. All we would look to see who are among our fellows had not yet been interviewed, and we didn't quite cover all of them yet, but we'll come pretty close after we finish with next season. So thanks, Ben, and thanks everybody for being with us. We hope to see you in Detroit. Take care.
Thanks, Mike.